What's up, everybody?
What's going on? What's going on? What's power?
Let me get myself situated just a little bit.
Now we was late to actually posting this. We was deliberating,
We had like what, two or three, maybe four
brainstorm
different
session.
topics
Yeah.
that and it ended up boiling down to this. Like, you might, as a result of this, we may have our topics planned out for like the next 2-3 weeks. But just off the strength, you know, because it's gotten real. It's gotten real. We I kind of think that we should start actually and uh tell me if y'all would be okay with this, if y'all had like a Patreon stream or maybe even some on Discord, because that does need to get done, where we have where we actually have, some of the, I guess you could say, outtakes, behind the scenes stuff, that's recorded, and you guys could listen to it exclusively there, for a nominal donation.
Right, right. Shout out to those of y'all who are just now joining us. Y'all know the way that we rock this thing.
Yes.
Typically 10 to 15 minutes in, we really get into having a formal discussion. Before then, we would like for y'all to, come on through, pop in, find some friends, get your popcorn and all of that. Get settled in for a
Yes.
conversation here at the Black in a Minute podcast.
Because we are here for you.
Facts.
I like doing that. But oh crap. Let's tweak that. I don't know what it says fear, but should say perspective. What does it say? There it is. There it is. That was odd. I don't know why it
But yeah, we
didn't
talking
change.
perspective tonight, y'all.
Yes. Perspective. Which, out of curiosity, just for people who are listening, what does that mean to y'all? Like, sorry, allergies. What do y'all think of whenever somebody says the word perspective? Like,
And if you need a minute, take your time.
yeah,
Like I said,
we just getting started.
yeah, we just getting started tonight.
Yes, 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 we are. Yes, we are.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. And in the midst of this, y'all might actually get to hear some stuff that I've been like just touching up, like beats and stuff. Just because I've been doing a little bit of double duty. I was like editing stuff as I was going along. So, it's been, I don't know. I just like to keep busy. I'm weird like that. Let's see. Trying to do a little quick advertisement. Uh, it kind of goes back into that concept of, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. People appreciate things in certain ways because of a certain way that they view it.
True, true.
And that's just something that we do have to keep in mind whenever we're approaching certain situations. Like, and in some ways, to be honest, the concept of perspective actually was kind of birthed from us debating about how we were going to approach a specific situation or subject, and we were like, well, you got to look at it from the right angle, approach it in the appropriate way, so that way you know what to do. And that kind of gave birth to the concept of perspective, and like really why we're talking about it today,
Correct.
if that makes any sense. uh it's definitely one of those things that excuse me, it's definitely one of those things that can't be explained in just one 30 hour 30-minute or hour segment, but it is certainly something that we can definitely start a dialogue about and continue on if you want.
I would say that it's at the root of all conversation, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I posed the question, how does it affect conversation? Because,
Yeah.
perspective is, in the most basic form, your point of view.
Right.
So, how does your point of view affect everyday conversations that you have?
Right.
Well, the simple answer is, this is particularly, a combination of our feelings, our opinions, and everything else
Right.
bottled up into one, you know, essential point or points, set of points, and how differences in these perspectives, right,
Yeah.
ultimately end up affecting our conversations in both good ways and bad. Because, at least for me,
Right.
and part of the reason why I thought it was a good topic was just because, you know, we often hear, especially when it comes to relationships more specifically, that that there's a problem with communication.
Yes.
And I think that where one of the biggest, if not the biggest area, right,
Right.
where maybe we can have a more calculated discussion about why this communication error exists
Right.
is in us talking about the differences in understanding different
Perspectives.
perspectives.
Yeah. Because what you realize is the reason they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words is because in so many ways it is. It literally is viewed differently by different people from coming from different situations, but it's the same thing. And that's why you can have situations where, as people would say, the same thing can have varying and different meanings.
Yeah. I think on the flip, it always reminds me back to, I've told you this story before, but
Yeah.
about my poem called "The Obvious Truth,"
Yeah.
and how I remember reading it to my family, and my older brother, I ain't gonna throw his government out there, but he knows what I'm talking about, came up to me afterwards, and I proposed a question toward the end of the poem, and he literally came up to me and asked me about the question, and then he went on further to say that he had an answer to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was rhetorical in a sense, but
He
for
had
him
an
to,
answer.
he said he had an answer. And when he gave me the answer was correct to the rhetorical question that I proposed.
Okay.
And so it was kind of just like,
Excuse
it
me.
was just like a moment we had
Mm.
where I was just like, there's something about, regardless of the conversation, interacting with a person, there's something about someone like truly understanding your perspective on something.
Right.
And it was just like for him to not only be that in tune with the art,
Yeah.
but for him to literally take the question proposed
And actually answer.
and actually answer it meant that he essentially understood the perspective that I was going for when I wrote it. And it was just so cool.
Right. And sometimes that's the good thing about music and art is that sometimes you're begging a question intentionally, and in other cases, you're not. And instead, it's an open door. Like music, art is an open door to where if somebody wants to beg the question, they can, but they don't necessarily have to. And sometimes I know with like us purists about hip hop, like we have that problem where we feel like everything has to have an explanation. Every bar has to have a meaning. Every line has to have a certain connotation to another line and another line, and so on and so forth. But the truth is, when you really get down to the nitty gritty,
Hold on a second, Negro. Can y'all see us? Are we coming in good? I'm getting feedback that we might not be coming in correctly visually or audio.
that's odd.
Can we get some thumbs or some comments? Let us know what's going on.
Yeah, put thumbs in the chat if y'all can see us and hear us.
Please and thank you.
Actually,
make
thumb
sure.
in the chat for seeing, peace sign if you can do it for hearing. I'm about to check myself. Excuse me.
Want to make sure you guys can see us.
Right. Let me see what's good. Let me see what's good. Okay. That's odd. They can't see us. Why does it still have the graphic up?
Should be down.
No. It still has a graphic up. It can hear us, but they can't see us.
What about now?
I'm looking at it now.
We're gonna get that straightened out.
Yeah, sorry about that. We didn't even know.
It shouldn't be showing
our
anything.
look perspective.
From our end, you're right.
From our perspective,
right?
We can see y'all should be able to see us, but that's weird. Okay. All right.
So it's not on this end.
Let me see. Okay, there we go.
There we go.
There we go.
That's weird.
There we go.
Peculiar. Sorry about that, you guys.
That's the system not working correctly.
Yo.
Blame Restream.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
No, I thought the sound went out for a second. I was scared.
But yeah, you know, that is the thing about perspective. It's viewpoint.
Yeah.
And viewpoint takes into consideration feelings, opinions.
Yes.
It also takes into consideration facts,
thoughts, beliefs, everything. And the thing about it is that
no audio.
No audio.
So we might not be getting no audio in.
Hold on. Everything. And the thing about it is that nope, it's good. I just checked it. It might have been. Well, I just realized it's delayed. Yeah, it's on the delay.
Sorry about that, you guys. It's random because on our end everything's working correctly.
Bro, it's been
including signal.
It's been weird. If you're having difficulty on Facebook for some reason, if you're on there, go to YouTube because I just checked YouTube. YouTube's working. So maybe it's Twitch acting up because we got somebody on Twitch. Shout out to the one person that be chilling on Twitch.
Okay.
I guess we need to start gaming or something.
I think there was like some sort of functional delay going on. But
how odd.
Yeah. But you know, we like we said, if you were affected by the delay in audio or video, we are talking perspective. And how it affects our day-to-day conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, I think my general ethos, for those who missed it, was just that, you know, the most common time where I hear people talk about communication issues tend to be in romantic relationships.
Yes.
In general, though, I think communication can be an issue regardless, right? But
agreed.
What it may seem, though, is that what it really is just not that people are inherently saying things that others don't understand, but they're not understanding the perspectives at which each other come from.
Right. They're not looking at it from that angle.
They might not even, you know, instinctually know that that's what they need to do, right?
Right.
Because you would need to have that conversation first. You would need to put that out there,
like engage in that sort of dialogue,
right? Because some of us take a more objective approach to things we say and do based off of definition,
right?
Some of us don't, but even at that point we have a mixture of both, just depending upon what the word is, what the conversation or the subject matter is, right? So it's like perspective. Like, I'm actually going to propose an even better, more specific question. And that question is, when was the last time that you had a conversation with someone and you realized that you guys was looking at something from a different perspective? Like truly understanding that perspective and having that, oh, that's what you meant.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, I can personally say, and I don't know if you twins on the chat, but we've definitely had, honestly, majority, and it sounds bad, but majority of the disagreements we've ever had have been of that nature, where I'm looking at it from one end, she's looking at it from another end, and we may low-key agree on what it is, but our presentation of it is different. Our presentation of our main ideas or our thoughts are different, right? So as a result, it's so stupid when you think about it, because I'll be like, it's like, yeah, it's this way. Yeah, I agree. what? Well, you know what I mean? Like, you'd be like, what you mean you agree? I thought you didn't agree. No, I agree. I do agree, you know? And maybe there's like an extra add-on that I have or an extra add-on that she has that changes how that narrative is viewed.
Okay.
And so as a result, it seems like we don't agree, but we're more or less agreeing. It's just the inclusion of that but. It's like, yeah, I agree, but did you look at this? Yeah, I agree, but did you look at that? And sometimes the addition of it, the inclusion of an additional perspective can cause an agree to become a disagree really quick. And next thing you know, getting into it about something dumb. Like it's crazy. It's truly crazy.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's just from personal experience. Like it's just it's stuff you learn with time. You know, time and years have taught me well about not only agreeing to disagree, but also understanding when you are actually having a disagreement. Because sometimes you're not having a disagreement. You know, that's the oddest part. Sometimes you have to understand, and sometimes we have to stop being so combative. And this is just something we as men and women have to stop being so combative and so quick to assume because of what we perceive that we're automatically going to get disagreed with. Because sometimes you might present an idea and somebody might straight up agree with you. You know,
I would say
be prepared for disagreements, but also be okay with agreements.
I think when it comes to seeing things from other perspectives, I think when you make a claim or something of someone else, that you have to take into consideration what their perspective is. So like, for example, if I say something about you,
Right.
And I make a judgment or a claim that you may think or believe in a certain thing.
Yes.
I have to be careful. It would be mindful of me to be careful of doing that because, for one, I'm not a mind reader.
No.
And the reason why that matters more than anything is because what I'm doing at that point is I'm assuming a perspective of you based off of what my perspective of you is.
Yes.
The problem with that is that I am not you.
No.
So I can't, it's almost like speaking for you.
Yes. Like it goes back to, and I'm sure you've seen it on a lot of media and stuff, where you have somebody calling themselves trying to defend someone. And we have that in situations where, like, I always reference my job. I'm sorry, I live there, but we have so many situations of that where the parents call themselves speaking for the children, or maybe the CASA, who are literally the voice of the children in court, will speak on it. And what you realize is, even though everybody's saying, well, this is for the sake of the kids, for some people, when their emotions get included, are you the real question is, are you speaking for the kids, or are you speaking from yourself and using that as a reason to be allowed to? You know, what are you giving agency to? What thoughts and opinions are you giving agency to because you feel some type of way? You know, and again,
Right.
That's perspective.
You know, it actually reminded me of a clip I remember seeing of Jordan Peterson. Are you familiar with him at all?
I feel like I've heard the name.
So Jordan Peterson, he's a college professor, what most people would call a theologian.
Okay.
One of those types.
Okay. I think I have heard of him.
So I remember he was doing an interview where he was talking about the gender pay gap.
Yeah.
And the lady kept on basically kind of like what we refer to as mansplaining, but as a woman.
Yeah.
And she, instead of like hearing what he was saying, she was basically, so what you're trying to say is,
she was doing that. Yeah.
And it's just like, no.
You're looking for a reason to be mad. That's what I call that.
No,
it's looking for a reason to be mad.
That's not what I'm trying to say. Like literally
if
what
you
I'm
listen for a second, you'll definitely get it though.
right, and you won't basically like
roll with me.
Like you won't basically, alter what I'm saying, but actually hear me with what I'm saying. You'll really like understand
Right.
what I'm trying to get you to understand and how it is.
Right. Just roll with me for a second. And
But she did a lot of that, and it's just like no, that's not what I said.
It's also unnecessary to do that. If you're trying to
trying to understand where someone is coming from,
that's not necessary.
You need to ask clarifying questions about what you don't understand.
Right.
Not, no, this is what it is. Because not only are you looking at it only from your perspective, the thing is, if there's a mix up in how something should be needs to be conveyed for people to understand,
right,
it's up to the person that's being misunderstood
to explain
it correctly, not the person trying to understand it to say that, to explain to everyone else like, oh no, this is what they're saying.
Like,
no, that's not what I'm saying.
Look, and the thing is, I think one part of it is that people need to understand that it's okay to say that you don't get something. I like to say, and it's kind of a judgmental view, but I feel like in this day and age, in the society we live in, we are governed by this narrative that in order to be supportive, we either have to be supportive or understanding or both. And sometimes those two things are not mutually exclusive. Sometimes you really don't have to be neither. Now, I can seek to understand something without being, outwardly supportive of it. You know what I'm saying? I can be understanding of something without straight up being supportive of it. I can be supportive of something without fully understanding it. Right?
True.
Case in point, you have situations where people will say that they're understanding, where they are supportive of women's rights, but as by virtue of being men, there are some things that we are not going to get about what women go through. Does that mean then that we cannot be supportive? No. But what it does mean is that we have to be open to whatever dialogue is given to us and whatever information is given to us so that we can properly understand how to be supportive, right? On the flip side, you can have a disagreement about, let's say, maybe the way that kids like dating ages, You could have a disagreement about dating ages of children, right? Does that mean that you don't understand it? No. You can understand that concept perfectly, but you disagree with their narrative on it or their reasoning, right? Doesn't mean you're knocking it. Doesn't mean you're, kicking them in the head about it, but you also don't support it. You know what I'm saying? And you can ask them for an explanation. I've had situations, like, it's the old school in me. I've had situations where, I've heard a parent say that their little 5-year-old got a boyfriend. And I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, wait. But in the forefront, I asked questions about it. So when I asked questions about it, they were like, well, the kid is a friend of the family, right? Okay. So the moms have been friends for years. Sure. So their kids have been acquainted with each other since basically birth. They're the same age, probably different by a month. And when they have play dates, that's who they mainly hang out with. So yeah, they claim each other. They argue like married couples, and it's funny as all get out. And they have an understanding of, and as a result, they have an understanding of each other's personalities, right? Again, do I fully agree with that? Is that something I think I would do with my kid? I don't know. No, it's probably not. You know what I mean? And maybe I wouldn't, again, perspective, maybe I wouldn't call it that, right?
Okay.
Like the old folks say, oh, that's just your little friend. That's your little friend. Yeah. And you a little friend until you hit a certain either age or you've been around long enough.
Or you get married.
Yeah, or you get married. Right. And that's kind of the thing. Now, let's be real. Most of them little friends was boyfriends and girlfriends. Okay. Let's keep it a buck. It's the same thing. But again,
that's the beauty in perspective.
yes. And again, once again, I don't have to agree with it. But disagreeing with it doesn't mean that I can't just ask for the sake of understanding. And that's the problem. People think that you have to be supportive or else. People think that you have to be supportive to understand, or that you have to understand to support, whichever one happens first. And you hurt your argument and you hurt your narrative when you make it so exclusive to where somebody who represents an outlier or represents an extraneous variable, sorry, psych talk, but or really math talk, or represents something that isn't in full agreement with you, you exclude them from being able to see what you see. If anything, them the main ones you should be talking to. Because if they can get it, then everyone else can get it.
You know, like I said before, I think perspective is just so big because it helps us at understanding who we are and who we are interacting with when we have interactions with other people.
Yes.
Because there are some things that we hold to be objective in a mostly objective world, and then there's things that we hold to be subjective. And
and that's perfectly okay.
It's okay. It's okay so as long as it isn't harming anyone.
Yes.
Because there comes a point where we do have to be careful, right?
Yeah.
But at least in the sake of what we're talking about in general, when we had these conversations, people say they have communication issues. Typically in relationships, you hear this.
Right.
And like I said before, I think what it is we're not understanding of perspectives, different people.
And to go further on, and I'll let you jump back in, but further on, we're not willing to. It's not, because a lot of times, and this is an excuse that we give sometimes, it's not so much that we can't understand it. It's not so much that you can't understand something you don't agree with. It's that you don't want to, because you're always afraid, and I'm saying you're subjectively, but because the person may be afraid that if they happen to give it a chance, the cognitive dissonance is going to come up, and now they're going to feel different about something. Now they're going to feel some type of way. Now they're going to fold on what they thought. But that's not always true. If you believe what you believe to be the truth, you can listen to other perspectives and it not move you. You know what I mean? Me and you have had discussions about stuff that and we can be on either side of the pole. And neither one of us folds on that. But does it mean that we can't have a dialogue? No. Does it mean that we're like never going to have a podcast again? We're never going to speak again? No.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I live in a house with somebody who we disagree on numerous things. But that doesn't mean that I can't talk to her. You know? Doesn't mean she can't talk to me. It just means that we know we have a disagreement on this angle.
And that we need to be aware of just that difference in perspective, because after a while it stops getting to a point where the disagreements become less.
Yeah.
And sometimes, for better or for worse, this is a learning thing. So we're learning things about each other that maybe it never came up, or maybe it's come up several times
and it's been ignored.
It's been ignored. It could have been, or it's been poorly articulated, right?
Yes.
So it's like, I don't understand what you mean. Okay. Well, let me try to break it down.
Let me reframe.
That's a lot, right? Let me reframe. Let me rephrase. Like, it's a part of life.
Yeah.
If y'all out here thinking you ain't never gonna have no communication issue with a person, they just gonna get you and you just gonna get them.
Bruh.
I don't know what Disney movie or fairy tale you've been stuck on.
Even they argue
like that. You're right.
Look. You know what what some old folks once said to me. Well, once said to us. It was actually a older evangelist that she used to come around all the time. She still does sometimes. And she said, look, she said two things, and I like both of these. One of these was that if you're in a relationship and there are no disagreements, that's a relationship where either everybody's lying or y'all ain't talking. Right? That's one. Now the second one is, and I do like this one. Look, you can't get divorced if don't nobody leave. Sometimes, and it's true, and it goes into the disagreements. You get mad, you disagree, somebody packs up and leaves, or gets out.
Been there.
And I understand if you got to take a powwow, go somewhere, get your head right, scream for a little bit, whatever you got to do, and then you come back. But make sure you come back ready to talk. There was something actually in this parenting book that I use for certain clients, and when it was talking about like co-parenting and dealing with like disagreements or coming to agreements with the mom, because it deals with the dads. It sets ground rules, and it says no more than I think about 30 minutes or so for a discussion. No name calling, no attacks. Everybody's allowed to share their opinion, and when she talks, you shut up and you listen. When you talk, she shuts up and she listen. And I like the last one. The last one says, don't assume that this will be the last time you have to discuss this. Because that's another one. One and dones don't always happen for disagreements.
With most things.
No.
Well, most things is usually not a matter of one and done.
No.
And that's why I say, when we talk about understanding, it's the perspective that we're really after, not understanding the situation, because situations can vary, but the underlying viewpoint, or here's another word, principle, of said thing could not be understood. And how do you find that out? Then there becomes a conversation about that, and that's where deeper awareness and understanding can come into play. Like I said, case in point, I had one of those things, one of those moments today where I was basically explaining like what I view as happiness and what it means to be happy for me.
Right.
The short version of it, because it's definitely more expansive than that, but the basic version of that, because in my mind I recognized at that moment that this was a key importance of distinction that needed to be brought out, because what I noticed, what it immediately chimed in my head was, we view this differently.
Yes.
So what needs to happen right here is this needs to be a moment of clarity. This needs to be a moment of, relevance, where basically like, all right, a light bulb just came on in my head at that moment. I was like, okay, here's a situation or an instance where maybe two people are talking past each other.
Yes.
Because their perspectives on this particular thing.
You don't see it exactly the same way.
Right. And so it was, in that moment, it was eye-opening for me, and I hope it was eye-opening for who I was talking to.
Yeah.
Because, and that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
That's another thing, yeah.
First, you have to understand, which hopefully before you get to that point in having any conversation with somebody,
right,
that there's already going to be a difference. But once you realize that there's a difference, what needs to happen next is
dialogue.
One of you needs to initiate a dialogue, hopefully, where whoever realizes it first makes that distinction apparent. Because what happens then is you bring clarity, or you can help bring clarity to a situation.
Yeah.
Because now you've defined and outlined how something looks and appears to you.
Right.
So now, if there was any confusion before, now on the flip side, they
should be able to reasonably see it.
Oh, right. The thought is, so that's why you thought like that, or that's what made you think that.
And see, the thing that gets me about people who do disagree and then shut off is it's always funny whenever they're forced to view a narrative. Because sometimes there's situations where you don't have a choice. you gonna see what you need to see, and it's amazing how much they cringe about it. And they'll sit there and be like, oh, and they're doing this, and these are grown people, and that's what cracks me up. They do like little kids, like little kids when they don't want to listen, they roll their eyes up and they move like this, and then they're doing it. They can't sit still because, and what it is that whatever it is, it's either starting to hit them or they're fighting it so hard to where it doesn't. And that's one of those things where you have to be practical in how you present your ideas. It's okay to have disagreements. It's okay to have differences in opinion. That's actually, in so many ways, that's how we grow. That's how we develop as people. Differences of opinion are needed in society so that way we don't stagnate ourselves. Because if I got an idea and I think my idea is perfect, and maybe you got a different idea, or you like my idea, but you think that maybe there was something I missed along the way, and you present it, guess what? Now we can have a dialogue about it. Now maybe I can refine my idea to incorporate some bits of what you had. And now it's a more concise thing, where before, because I never talked to anybody about it, I just thought it was perfect.
You know what? Or even just a suggestion.
Yes.
Because, one of the things that I've always said before is, I'm all open for like suggestion and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that I'm going to include that suggestion in what I do, but just having
at least consider it.
Yeah. Because consideration.
Yes.
I may not, but the fact that the door is open, right?
And that's and that's the other thing. It's just because you're considering a perspective, and I can't say this enough, just because you're considering an idea, a narrative, or perspective doesn't mean that you automatically agree with it. Just because you're thinking about something or thinking about how somebody said something doesn't mean that you automatically agree with it. And I've been in these situations, I'm sure you have too, where there's a dialogue going on and everyone looks at you, and because you don't immediately say no or you don't immediately dismiss it,
you co-opt it.
Yes, everybody assumes that you're just with it until you're not. Until you say something where they're like, well, hold up, that doesn't sound like what we were talking about. That don't sound like what we like. Why you say that? No. Here's what you don't understand. And this is the way, and I like that some of these books and some of these other things talk about, because you have to do this with your kids and other people, validate their ideas, which is, hey, you don't have to directly say I validate you. Please don't. But it sounds so cringe. But hey, I appreciate you for bringing that idea about. I'm glad you feel that way, or however you want to say it. Be like, hey, or be like, hey, that's a concept I never thought about. That's a perspective I never thought about. Let's talk about it more. Let's dig deeper into that, or let's see what's going on there. Like, why do you feel that way?
And I don't know if this is a synonym or not, but because perspectives differ, right?
Right.
Perspectives differ. When I hear that, what I think is acknowledge, right? So I mean,
you acknowledge that person has a right to how they think and how they feel. No matter how right or wrong you think it is, they have a right to think and feel that way.
I think the confusion, and like I said, we all are contributors and victims, because we all express it and do it. Some of us more than others, but it's a very easy mistake. It's a very easy mistake to have.
Oh, exceedingly so.
And I know I can be guilty of it, just because I'm a very much more cut and dry kind of person.
Right.
So with people like me, right, it becomes more apparent, just because when you live when you're much more of a
rigid person,
a rigid, or even a more fixed individual in that regard. Sometimes what will happen is that you may conduct yourself in a way that breathes specificity.
Yes.
And so what may happen is what you may become either a victim or a contributor of is communicating something as your outward expression of your perspective.
Yeah.
But it not being understood
because
in that moment you're not taking into account the other perspective that it'll be viewed from. Or basically you feel like you said it so clear.
Yeah, that you don't even bother
that
to
you don't even
double take it or look at it.
You don't you lack the consideration to realize that even as clear as you may be in that moment,
you could always make things more clear.
Right. You may have to chop it down.
Yeah.
And stuff like that comes with time. That's why I say, you know, these are learning dynamics that we all must endure.
Yeah.
Because I can't lie about it.
Right.
The way my mind and my personality is set up, you know, I am more of a this or that person, and I make no mistakes. I don't mince that. Anybody who knows me knows I'm kind of like that.
Yeah.
You know, and for better or for worse, sometimes that
it is what it is.
Yeah, sometimes that leads to great things, or you know, ways in which it's better, as the question purports down below. And then sometimes it can be for the worse. Yeah. Because sometimes I can feel like, and this is just me using myself as an example, I'm being perfectly clear, but I'm feeling that I'm being so perfectly clear that it's that much harder for me to hear another perspective, because I'm only viewing it from mine, and mine says 2 + 2 = 4.
And there's no possible way. It's just like what I told you while I was talking about before. Because of how you feel about it, you feel, well, there is no other perspective. You can't have another perspective because there is no other perspective.
Or even how it's been for me on the flip side at times too, where it's like not rationalizing other possibilities of things,
not even considering them,
where we basically where it basically becomes a matter of like, yo, how did you come
to that
conclusion, knowing that there could be other conclusions?
Yes.
Too. Like,
did you consider that there even are,
or did you consider that it was that? And you know, I think that's the biggest. Like, for anybody in the audience listening, if any of this is hitting on any dynamics that you may have dealt with in your personal life or not,
right?
Think about it for a second
and drop it in the cat.
Ain't no way in hell this ain't speaking to nobody in any particular situation they had, whether it was a yesterday situation, a month ago. Like, this happens,
right? And
this is why it's important, because when we say conversation ruled the nation, what we really talking about is self-expression.
Yes.
And that exchange of expression. Because that's the thing.
Those are things that can start literal wars.
Yes, sometimes we are contributors, like I said before, and you know, sometimes we're the ones doing it, and sometimes we're the ones being done too. There's no way in the world where you come across somebody that's always on the key in both. No, you will not.
No,
we all do it.
It doesn't exist.
I can think of plenty of times when I've been that person, but I can also think of times where I felt it was being done to me. I knew it was being done to me. And so it's not about, you know, who's right or wrong, but just simply
who's listening,
trying to get, trying to get the other person as best you can.
Yeah.
To understand
where you coming from.
And
see, to me, that's always been how I look at it from a practical standpoint. Look, if you're saying something, you're saying it so that way I can get it. Right? That's what communication is. That's what we teach children. And otherwise you're just vomiting words. And the biggest issue is, like you said, when you assume that, you know, there's no way that this could be different, what you have to think about is you have to think back to those times where you're in a situation and somebody shares a narrative to you and pushes it so hard to where you have no room to breathe, where you have no room to provide a rebuttal or no room to really say anything else. What's good, Yo Curly? Oh,
What's
Lord, we
going
got Yo
on?
Curly in the house.
Oh, shoot.
Yeet.
The
But,
man.
yeet. It's like, you're.
I'm so that name come across the screen. I
was like, oh, word. But, hey, but legitimately, you know, you got to remember what it feels like when somebody puts you against the wall with their opinion. And you end up in a situation where you like, well, dang, I don't even know why. You know, you think like, I don't even know why I brought this up. Why did I say anything?
I think,
right,
bro. I think that's why I think true understanding, is a beautiful thing.
Yes, it
because
is.
when you had that moment, you're just like, oh, okay. So what you
now.
mean is, I never thought about it like that before.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it starts to really like come full circle.
Funniest thing about that, I was joking around with my buddy Travis. I was helping out at this other church, right? And he's putting some stuff together. And he was like, "Hey, man, so you know, because he's married. He's like, so how's married life going?" I'm like, "It's the same but different, you know." He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, we still broke." He's like, "Yeah," and he joked around. He's like, "But at least there's someone there with you." You know, you broke together, and we're like, yeah, it's like, you got somebody who understands where you coming from. Like, you get it. It's like, yeah. See, you get it. You look, you understand. And we laughing, but that just cued back into my head that, yeah, you do. Like in that situation, because you're going through an experience as a unit, they do understand your perspective to some degree, and you understand theirs because you're seeing how the adversity is affecting them. They see how it's affecting you. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, you do. By virtue of being in the same boat, you are allowed an opportunity to understand somebody else's perspective.
It's definitely a lot easier.
Right.
Yeah, that's why
it's not a guarantee.
We all grew up, right?
It's not a guarantee.
And as we all grew up, put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Right.
That was that was always like the rudimentary basic framework for trying to understand someone else's viewpoint, is to see it from their lens and see if you get it.
And I think
if you get what's being, projected to you.
And I think the one thing I would add on to that, because sometimes we don't think about this, because I know I don't think about this all the time, is stop expecting someone else to fully understand you just because you presented it once. And then on the other end, stop assuming that you're going to understand everything just because they presented it to you. Some things we have to take at face value because we may never get it.
Yeah, and some things we have to be investigative. We have to dig and
like case in point, childbirth. There's not a man on earth that is ever going to fully understand childbirth, no matter how deeply you explain every single bit and piece of the process. Why? Because we will never experience it.
Man, don't. Hey,
but we can count on the collective experiences of individuals who have had that. Look at the congruencies amongst them and get an idea.
Yeah, we can definitely have a consensus.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Yo, Curly had a question. Question on perspective. What's right and what's wrong? So you missed this part of the conversation. I think Curly.
But, I think we touched on it a little bit.
Basically, we can go back to it because this is important, right? In the scope of how we get to the understanding portion.
Right.
So there's objective truths, right? And then there's subjective truths. And where the rubber meets the road at is deciding how two things can be accepted and understood at the same time, regardless of whether they're right or wrong. Because, for example, you can have an objective fact, like something just being objectively true. I'm thinking of examples, but like literally every example I can think of is some hot button shit. Mm-hmm. and my voice ain't nowhere near there. Not that I wear it out, but for those kind of topics. But you have some things, right? I'll give you an example.
Right.
YouTube don't cancel us, but I'm gonna give this example.
Uh-huh.
There's huge conversations about who can get pregnant, who can
Yeah.
have, who can, bear children.
Mhm.
We're having a lot of conversations about gender pronouns, and this is
Yeah,
where a lot
yeah.
of this type of stuff lives at.
Right.
And on one end of the spectrum, you have people where they think is, or their thought space is, there are only two genders.
Right.
And the way that we tell that is based off of chromosomes along with
Genetic.
genitalia,
Yeah,
and
like just genetic predisposition.
and then you have other people where they're just like, well,
There are numerous.
they're numerous, and I self-identify as
This.
blank.
Yeah.
And so we live in a world where you see these two contrasting perspectives
Right.
tangling with each other a lot.
Right.
Now, there's one that most people would argue is more of an objective truth, whereas the other one is subjective, more so, more or less. And so, truthfully, what should be most important, at least in my opinion, what's even more important than what's right or wrong is, do we understand? Because I will tell you this, I know where I stand on the particular subject.
Right.
And I'm going to say that for a different episode.
Yeah, same.
But what I will say is that regardless of the viewpoint, I understand
why the perspective,
where you're coming from. Yeah, I understand why the perspective exists.
And that's always my thing, is like,
even if I don't agree with whatever the perspective may be,
you not only understand, but you're also willing to see it from where they're presenting.
I'm willing to hear it.
Yeah, hear it out.
I'm willing to hear it out.
Right. Because here's my thing. My thing is always, if you feel this way, surely there must be a reason why. And if there's a reason why, then maybe me understand. And I've always said this, even if I don't agree, if you understand where something comes from, it's a lot easier for you to not only deal with it, reconcile it, and understand it. It's a lot. You notice it's a lot easier to deal with something and even deal with a disagreement or an agree to disagree situation if you understand where the other person is coming from. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's shows where you'll watch, a villain, and they present their perspective. Does this mean you're going to go out and, do what they do? No. But does it mean that you get why they do it? Yeah. And in some ways, it does make it easier. Like, you ever remember that old show Recess?
Yeah.
You remember that episode where TJ found out that one kid didn't like him? And he racked his brain. If you remember, you might have to look back at it. Dude spent like half the episode trying to find ways to either get this dude to like him and be cool with him, because, nobody's got an issue against TJ, right? And he's like, why this dude don't like me? He don't even know me, It's like, what's his problem? Blah, 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 blah. And approaching him, and he starts doing all these nice things for dude and hanging out with him, trying to get to know him, doing all this other stuff, trying to get him to know him. And look, and it was funny because at the end, he looked at him and goes, it's like, I still don't like you, right? And he's like, and he kind of had to accept it because it drove him nuts. And then he was like,
go back and see that
look, but it always cracked me up because it's like, you did all this stuff and he still don't like you. It's like, why don't you like me? I don't know. Just don't like you.
Yeah, and that, see, that's a tangent of irrational, rational versus irrational, like logic.
Right.
There's an element of logic that may come into, that may dance around some of these conversations that we're having when we're talking.
And at the same time, because that's their perspective, that's their view, that's their belief, they're allowed to have that, and you have to validate that.
I want to read this question from
okay.
Curly. He said, example, just talking extreme. someone killing something with a gun. Is that right or wrong? I think it's a bit broad, Curly.
Yeah.
Can you frame it into a more specific scenario?
Yeah.
Um,
That's a broad brush, bro.
Because I would be more willing to engage with that. Make it a little bit more specific.
Because there's honestly no one answer to that.
I can think of some applications where killing something with a gun
is wrong,
but I can also think of when it could be right.
Right. Or at the very least understandable.
Justified.
Yeah.
So because I think that might be an interesting discussion there within this topic. But yeah, there's an element of logic and reason that does exist within these things. And I'm always a big proponent of, especially when it comes to feelings specifically, they're ever changing and ever evolving. And I think that within the subjectivity of what our feelings are, there can lie objective factors that we ought to consider.
Right.
But that's life.
And the difference is, and this has been a big question that's been asked in a lot of cases in a lot of situations, the difference between killing out of passion, killing for sport, and killing to protect. I think there's narrative versions of this. You'll have situations where somebody is absolutely ready and willing to kill to protect, or kill out of duty, right? Kill out of a sense of necessity. But they will never kill for sport, and they would never do these same actions if they felt like there was another way.
Right. And in the same breath of how we have people who do the opposite.
It's kind of the Batman argument. It's the
passion and not for defense and all
like that. Think about it. It's the Batman argument. Like, realistically, as much as everybody loves Batman, let's be real and nonfiction about it. On some end, I understand why he says we don't kill. All that does is put you on the path to becoming a killer, potentially, right? But at the same time, there are certain people, there are certain individuals, certain entities, I guess, in that situation, in which incarceration or subduing that individual is not enough. It's not enough. It's a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid. And in some situations, you don't need a Band-Aid. You need a solution. And maybe there are situations where there is no other option. And that's the thing that you have to consider. There is always going to be a situation where you don't have the luxury of thinking and cognitively sussing out the details of what you have to do. Sometimes you only have a certain amount of time,
like a police,
to do whatever you got to do. Or like that guy who took out that active shooter in 15 seconds. 15 seconds is all he had. You imagine how quick of a decision you got to make to take somebody out, not in a minute, not 2 minutes, in 15 seconds.
And
that's maddening.
We'll have examples, right?
Right.
Because the world, life is so simple yet complex.
Oh yeah.
We have plenty of examples when we see some of these different dynamics and stuff play out.
Right.
That's kind of like, to what your Curly proposed. That's kind of like why we ask these questions, right?
Yeah.
Because you could frame a situation where something would be appropriate versus when it would not.
Right.
And then you can have a discussion about, well, what makes it right or wrong. And even with some of these hot button topics, such as abortion or such as gender roles or such as cancel culture. I can name a list of these different things that people are talking about right now.
And cancel culture is a huge example of why these questions have to be answered, and why these things have to be proposed, and why certain perspectives do have to be considered. Because at certain points, cancel culture does two things. Cancel culture forces the narrative that people are not redeemable, which in some cases that may be true, but not in all. And also, two, pushes the narrative that the moment that you make a mistake, even if it was in your past, if it was in your present, maybe you're about to do it in the future, you are automatically subject to judgment and, well, cancellation, and that you can't come back from that. Now, don't get me wrong, there are certain decisions that we make in this world that are irrefutable. Once you've done it, it's a non-refundable transaction. You know what I'm saying? Once you have a kid and the kid is out, that's a non-refundable transaction. You can't put him back in there. Okay? You can't undo that.
Right.
Once you kill somebody, you can't unkill them. You know what I'm saying?
True.
So yes, there are certain things that are, as I will call it, non-refundable decisions. But that doesn't apply to everything. And some people, now look, how many people we know from back in high school that were just bullies, jocks, a-holes, whatever you want to call them, people who were just absolutely incorrigible. And now that it's been some years and they've been through some things, and maybe they got kids, or maybe they got, wives and husbands, or maybe they moved on with their life. Now they are actually functioning as at least semi-productive members of society. Making the assumption that that person is the same person they were like 12 years ago is not only ineffective, it's stupid. Because you're making an assumption for that you understand every stage of life they've been through up until that point.
That you understand what they thinking, what they've thought, that you understand the reason why they are the way
And
they
you can
are.
predict exactly where they're going to go with it.
Yeah.
And you can't. You can't. And for some people that may be difficult. I think Yo Curly said, I think it's all about being justifiable if it's good or bad, or maybe what religion you may follow. Yeah. Well, and the thing, and when you go into religion, here's an interesting perspective about that, because I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of things in religion are based on what we call the natural law. I know, at least in the case of Christianity, because that's the one I understand the most, a lot of things are based on natural law. I actually had a preacher say this. There's a such thing as sins against yourself, like sins against God, and there are such things as sins against nature, right? Things that contradict nature, things that contradict the natural law of life. Murder is a sin against nature because you are eliminating life that naturally occurs. You are taking something out prematurely. That is something that violates the nature of life. That is something that you are violating nature,
which is a part of the premise, but not completely.
Exactly.
About one of the most hot button topics currently going on with abortion.
Right.
But I'm gonna leave that at that.
But I say that to say that that's what a lot of that is based in. There is a such thing called natural law. Now, are there situations where, as being individuals who are intelligent, astute, and sentient, and having and being able to understand the situation better than your average animal, are there situations where we can justifiably violate nature? Yes. Is it always okay? No. Is it always right? No.
Will there be any consequences? Possibly.
Probably.
Yeah.
In most cases, there probably will be.
Yes. And so it's important that
you have to consider all of that before you make that decision.
And why does this matter? Because the conversation is about perspective.
Yes.
Someone else may have a different perspective. And it's only when we get into these debates and things that we feel the need to prove someone to be right or wrong. When the reality of it is that simply different people have different views about it. And it's only when you've decided that your view is elitist.
Yes.
And right, and without any,
there it is,
without being infallible, that you decide that any viewpoint that is not this viewpoint is not only not right, but it's the problem. When you live in a society where a difference of opinion will make you a bigot, a phobe, a ist, you really have a problem with culture, which is why we did a whole pod about cancel culture specifically.
Yeah.
When you get to the point that you attack people because you don't like their viewpoint,
what makes you suddenly better than them?
What makes you and your viewpoint so much more better than them?
Right.
And is there not any potential problematic dynamics that can come from your viewpoint as well? Because we take this.
And are you willing to talk about that?
Yeah. Are you willing to admit that this could be a problem? Or are you that ignorant?
Right.
Because,
or that adamant about sticking to whatever it is that you're sticking to.
Yeah, because I'm going to give y'all a little spoiler, and then I'm going to address what Keontae said here.
What's good? What's good, Keontae? It's good to see you.
Me and NeRo, before we was talking about perspective, what led to us talking about perspective was actually a short conversation about privilege and racism. Because one point that we both found common ground on is simply that for racism to truly be something, a phenomenon that's understood to be unbiased in terms of who it can happen to. The common opinion and common ground point that we came to is that anyone can be racist. Now, if you don't come from that view, guess what? You're entitled to that viewpoint and perspective.
Now, and speaking of that,
that means I understand.
Right.
But respectfully, I disagree.
Right. And the interesting thing about that is there are certain concepts where I've heard people present this, and it's valid, but because it's a different way of looking at it, where they look at the base definition of what racism is. And a lot of people will say that Black people are not capable as a whole of being racist. And by that, I mean, let me see if I can bring this up real quick. And this is like a theory now in terms of certain relations, they bring it up in a way that Black people as a whole cannot be racist because there is no way that we can financially, economically, or environmentally oppress the other group because we do not have that type of power or influence.
We're so oppressed that we have no capable means of. Can I ask you a question?
And again, that's collectively.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you as one person cannot look at a person of a different color, because it ain't always white folk. Actually, in a lot of cases, it's the other brown folk that we do it to.
Look.
And we can sit there and be in a semi or a temporal position of authority or power in front of these people, and we can do something racist towards them. We just don't define it as that.
We don't even define it as prejudice, which it could be defined as that.
Now, I will say this: Black people may not be able to be collectively racist in that sense, in that we do not have that much power or influence over things to where we can literally shut somebody down or shut another collective race down. But we can absolutely be prejudiced.
I think
absolutely.
For me,
right.
For me, and this is now me showing my perspective, that is similar to Nick's, but also has some differences. But when there's an understood respect for difference in opinion, two people can have a conversation like this and it doesn't lead to anything problematic.
Absolutely.
Before I go into my point, I'm gonna read what Keontae said here.
Yep.
The thing about perspective is that it's most often when it comes into play, multiple parties are trying to justify their perspective and therefore debunk or invalidate others' perspective as not being based
on the side of reality.
On the side of reality. And yes, I mean, that's important. And we kind of said a mouthful. We kind of touched on that earlier too. There's objective reality and there's subjective.
Yes.
Subjective is usually consistent of what your truth is.
Yes.
And whereas objective is
the truth. Yes.
And it's important that we understand that both of these things can exist at the same time. However, it's a lot harder just fundamentally to force your truth onto society
someone else. Yes.
When you already going against the truth.
Yes.
And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it in this aspect too. This is one of the reasons, and I've said this to a few people before, and it's a thought that I have, but this is one of the reasons why people are so touchy when it comes to their rights.
Yes.
The reason why is that, and if you don't agree with this perspective, that's okay. I would just implore you, I would recommend that you read up on the Constitution. The reason why a lot of people are very particular about constitutional rights, because this ain't just a white thing.
No.
Is because literally the Constitution doesn't really discriminate in the general sense of mentioning anything about race. These are supposed to be human rights that are associated to the people born on the land.
It did used to, but it doesn't really anymore.
So it's like when you talk about when you talk about people having rights to the land, the first two, because those are the biggest ones that people contest today, is the freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. Those don't have anything to do with race. No. They have everything to do with people in America.
Yes.
So if you're a person in America, that is your right, regardless whether you're black, white, or whatever.
Right.
And for the Second Amendment right, because gun control is another one of those hot button topics, it's simply this. Everybody has that right. And in a weaponized world where we all understand enough that the guns don't just go away.
No.
It is your right to express that you can lawfully protect yourself.
Yeah.
And it was primarily rooted in protecting yourself from not just other people around you, more specifically,
a rogue government. Yes.
If the government was ever to go in and out of it and do that.
Right. Yo Curly said you got to look at who wrote those rights and who it was for. And yes,
that's that's exactly
and I will say that's the reason why there are amendments. Yes. And
that's the whole purpose of an amendment.
But
like a lot of
founding fathers, which were it wasn't for the black, and we know that. That's why the 3/5 compromise did exist. We know that. But the simple fact is, look at that perspective again at what he just said. The whole reason that the right to bear arms exists is because of colonialism. It is because of European colonialism. Because if you think about it, the whole reason they said you have a right to bear arms is so that way you wouldn't have another England. You wouldn't have another system where somebody decides they want to be king and they decide they want to unfairly tax you and they want to send you here and do these things and do other things to you in the same way that was done when when America was colonized. That gives them full rights to literally do the same thing they did to liberate themselves.
Yo, Curly, I've actually read it. A lot of people haven't read it. That the right to bear arms part, that's just an excerpt. Like most of these amendments and stuff, the Bill of Rights,
they're very lengthy.
Most of these things are paragraphs. It's just like Roe v. Wade.
If not whole books.
Roe v. Wade, and this is a slight tangent, but Roe v. Wade wasn't a constitutional right. It wasn't just a matter of people just choosing not to do something because of patriarchy or anything like that. Right. It was never something that was directly mentioned. Most of these states and provinces and stuff already actually had laws about this up until Roe v. Wade happened. A lot of people don't even know like what actually Roe v. Wade was about or any of the terms of it was about. It was having to do with a rape case that involved a woman that didn't fully tell the truth about what actually took place. And that should hit very home to anyone else especially if we're going to talk about it from our community standpoint, when you bring up things like Planned Parenthood and or Emmett Till, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's why I say that's the beauty in perspective.
Right.
It allows us
and
to
actually
do that.
Since you brought up the amendment, I actually just brought up the Second Amendment, and it does say a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It is the first half that no one ever looks at. And what the first half says, look, okay, so Yo Curly said the Second Amendment right wasn't meant for everybody to bear arms, just people who were part of a militia route regulated militia. And yeah, it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. And that is the reason why there are legal standpoints of why you can bear arms. There are legal precedences that you have to go through in order to have and possess weapons.
But on the flip side of that, right? Because you mentioned the free state thing. That's also why when we talk about like the different regulations on abortion, there's nowhere in the United States where it's just outlawed under no circumstance at all. If you think that, please do some research. You can actually look up the laws as they are in every state. You can look this stuff up.
There are some of which that are exceedingly archaic that don't even get observed anymore.
There's only a few places, Alabama being one of them, which is why it was brought up earlier this year, for those of y'all who remember, before this part even happened, when they got caught out for that shit. And that was men and women who made that decision for their state government. Like that actually happened with men and women at the table. But the whole purpose was to put a lot of this stuff back into the power of the states. So now it became a ballot thing. That's the reason why here in Indiana, there's more of a stand your ground type of setup, or a Florida or whatever. Whereas if you go to Illinois, it's a whole different dynamic of how you do it.
And the whole thing, and the whole thing about the stand your ground, it's very specific. If somebody comes up and presents themselves as a threat, but they do not have a weapon, you are not allowed to shoot them.
Right. And depending on where you're at in some jurisdictions,
or if they run away, if they
run away, you cannot. So it's important,
because then you are not defending, you are pursuing.
Right. And so that's why that matters too. Like when we talk, when folks be talking about laws and stuff, or just say something's like there was so many people saying, well, it was just all this way or all that way. It's just like,
well, remember the Trayvon Martin thing. That was not a stand your ground. That was not a stand your ground situation because he ran. One, it wasn't his property. Two, he was never on anything that constituted his property. And three, even if he was, he attempted escape.
That's why
he tried to run.
That's why
you can't, even if somebody is invading, you cannot do anything to somebody like that and not be considered a pursuer.
That's why I've adopted at this point in 2022, because if you asked me this in 2016, you might have got a different opinion.
It'd be like that.
But that's the life of a person willing to do some further research, willing to view things from different perspectives.
Emotional maturity.
Sometimes your mind may change, and that is okay.
Yes.
I will say that is okay. That is okay. That is okay. Why am I saying that many times? Because it can be jarring when you go from having one opinion, especially if it's an extreme opinion,
and go to another one. Yes.
That can be very fucking jarring. For a lot of people,
that is
a question of identity, especially if you decided that you rooted something about you to be that much a core of your identity.
Especially if it's something generational.
Especially if it's something such as race, which is what a lot of people do. A lot of people are so white or so black that to believe anything that may question elements of that, or go against some of the preconceived notions that you chose to believe, is not only blasphemous, but it is not right. It is in our community, that's coonish.
Yes.
Right? That's coonish. That's
you're being traitorous to your race.
That's Sambo. It's those kind of things.
And you will be labeled as such.
And that's why, look, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna give you a prime example of some shit I did that to, that I still think about to this day. I remember Donald Trump tweeted something about black on black crime.
Right.
And I looked at it and I was just like, oh, those stats aren't accurate. And I called myself low-key policing another black person about it by you're like, yo, you don't need to be sharing that. Those are not very accurate.
Right.
In fact, I just seen the high numbers and I was just like, oh, those aren't very accurate. And I did a little bit of research. I did enough research to confirm my bias.
Yes.
But what I didn't look into was the disproportionality of these things.
Yes.
And the reason why these things matter is because it was about black on black crime. But if you ask me today about black on black crime, I will say to you, it is very much controllable. It's not just rooted in racism.
No.
And there are differences that we as a culture can make. The me of yesterday would have been like, that doesn't happen enough. We need to be talking about police this and police that.
Okay, yeah, but niggas still shooting each other. Like
exactly. As if that's something that's so separate that we can't have a conversation about that.
Or that we have
the
to
same
pretend
way that we had a conversation about the police.
Or that we have to pretend that it magically doesn't exist for this moment. And the thing is, look, I've been the same way. I've been in those arguments. Now I was a little more bending. I was a little bit more bendy than you were, but like I have had these conversations, especially with older folks, because older folks will beat that, and it's because they beat that black on black crime thing to death. They beat that whole "we failed the youth" thing to death, and it grinds me. But and I had to, and I explained to an older woman that I do respect. I said, the thing that y'all don't understand, and this is something I do still believe, but I approach it from a different angle, is you cannot come at the youth. And I used to do it. I used to do this too. You cannot come at the youth recklessly and that be the only time you talk to them.
No.
You cannot come at the youth with the assumption that they're going to be a bunch of gun-toting hoodlums, or if they're not gun-toting hoodlums, they got friends that are gun-toting hoodlums, and they want to be gun-toting hoodlums too. And if they happen to be in a car with a bunch of other gun-toting hoodlums that they don't know are gun-toting hoodlums, that all of a sudden, now you got to beat the hell out of them because they were in the car with somebody they ended up being guilty by association. The punishment has already been laid out.
Yeah.
Now is time for you to conversate, create a dialogue, communicate with them, because half of these kids don't feel like they're being heard. And it's not until you sit down and you talk to them and you see how instantly dismissive some parents can be, some adults can be,
man,
that you realize this is why they don't listen to you.
I think also, like I told you
before, I went off on a tangent, but like
you good.
But
I think also this is kind of like how I said to you earlier, where I didn't, and I can speak from being one way and going to another way.
Right.
I can speak of the differences between. Yeah. You know, some people stay the same way they are from others. Some people opinions shift as they age. Hopefully you're that person.
Right.
Where
you grow with grace.
You grow and you change, and that's okay.
Right.
It doesn't make you a hypocrite for thinking one thing.
It just makes you
and having
human.
A change of mind on something.
It makes you human.
Some people be dying on heels that they don't have to just because they're so more worried about being a part of something.
Half the time they don't even like it anymore.
Be an individual. Because look, I seen something the other day that was talking about America was racist. And I was just like, you know what? 2016 me would have seen that and just wouldn't be like, yeah, America's definitely racist.
Yeah.
2022 me was just like, well, I don't think America's racist.
I think Americans are.
Yeah, I think people in America are racist.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, so if we're going to have a conversation about, I don't know how you can just say America is racist. Because for me to think that America is racist,
that means that by definition, there is no cure. There's no
remedy. Right. It
can never be changed.
Yeah, it's totality. I can't get it out.
Totalitarian.
Yeah, it's like absolute.
Yes.
And it's definitely not that. But are people in America racist? Hell fucking
God,
yeah.
yes.
We got plenty of them out here.
Yeah.
But also, it's just like Abraham Lincoln, right? Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Now, depending on how you feel about that, depending on how you feel about that, that either wasn't enough or you don't care.
Right.
Now, I'm not here telling y'all that Abraham Lincoln is a martyr or somebody that you need to praise from the rooftops.
Because he ain't. Please don't. Look. I will say this. Please don't be. I don't think old people do this anymore. But Please don't put up a picture of Abraham Lincoln next to Jesus. Please don't do that.
Some people do. And look, I'm cool with you. Look,
please don't.
I'm gonna say this.
Do
though,
your
right?
research first. I ain't gonna say don't.
I would be
do
the
your
person
research
before
first.
that would. I would be the person before that would hate you for it. Look at you like you. What the fuck? But me today is just like, you know what? I understand why you would feel that way.
Yep.
Because one thing I can say is that if I were to believe like something like, say, America was racist, right?
Right.
And that every white person wasn't for black people or anything else, right?
Well, Javar.
Then here's the thing. In a systemic world, like sometimes I think we talk in so much absolutes that we be trying to make things be the most negative and evil version of
because it's easy to do.
Because it's easy to do, and it confirms our bias.
Yes.
So I'm just like, you know, I know why Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves.
Right.
You know, I know that wasn't his primary goal with it.
And if he didn't have to do it, he wouldn't have did it. But that's not what was said. And that's where context comes up.
Right. Because the matter of it is that
they didn't say, oh, he did it because he wanted to protect
because he really cared about. Right. But
no,
two things can be true at the same time.
Right.
In that if it didn't happen, where would we be at today?
Right. And the other part, just to inject a little bit of history, it's context again. It's a context. Yeah. Look, Sid telling Lincoln stories. No, he was there. I'm dead. But no, like realistically, here's the thing about the whole Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves thing. Here's the truth. The truth is that Abraham Lincoln put out the Emancipation Proclamation before the war between the states was won. If that was a conditional, it wasn't even a law. It was a conditional proclamation that was absolutely contingent on the South losing. If, for whatever reason, the South would have won, the Emancipation Proclamation would be null and void. At least in southern states. It never would have held weight because they did not, and it's not because of what it says in it. It's because because the southern states seceded from America proper, they had no authority to even enforce it. The enforcement was the war at that point. That's why some people say that it was a war over slavery. It never really was. Not up until that point. At that point, it technically was because that was the only way that they could legitimize that proclamation. If the South won, if the North lost, they could annul that instantly because then the power structure me a second. Okay, sorry. We cut off for a second. But I was gonna say this. Before that, and then we'll get to Keontae. Sorry, we went off a little bit. Let's talk about Reconstruction. Does anybody know anything about the Reconstruction era? About how, yes, the slaves were freed. One, it took until Juneteenth for them all to get freed. And even that's not a guarantee because of how slow information traveled. Two, even when they were, most of them ended up being relegated to menial jobs, if any, and were regularly persecuted. A perfect example is a famous character that people may know, Paul Robeson. His father was a pastor of a church, and he got ran out of that place as a result of racist whites during Reconstruction.
Did I tell you? Have I ever told you a story about my? Have I ever told you a story about my great grandfather?
Yes, you did tell me.
Literally a similar story.
Yeah.
My great grandfather got ran off his property by the KKK because they tried to.
They tried to get him to sell his land, didn't he?
They tried to take it from him, and he ended up killing one of them. And basically, they gave him a choice. You know, either leave or we're gonna kill all your family. And he left.
Yeah.
Because of that decision, I'm able to have these conversations.
Right.
So a lot of times, you know, perspective is everything. And
Yes.
you know, for many, there's more than one thing to glean from these discussions. And that's why I say, you know, when we talk about data and statistics and stuff, it's important that we also look for any information that would possibly go against what we think.
Yes.
Once we found the confirmation bias, look for if there's a prevailing opinion, don't just settle on those people being racist or bigots.
No.
And one way you can understand
look for the contrary opinion.
Yeah, like one way you could try to understand them is to look for contrasting opinions, because what you might find is that a lot of people that disagree with you aren't just coming from some sense of idiocracy, you know, ignorance or not. A lot of times people are well read too, and they may know something that you don't know.
They've thought this through. They just don't like it.
They just have a different. They have a different perspective because of the information they've come across too. I want to read what Keontae said here. To say America is racist, I'd say the majority of people would have to be racist, but one person could affect many based on their position in society, which is why institutional racism is more
important. Yes,
I think
definitely.
I agree with that. I would also say that with institutional racism, I like to also look at I'm gonna say this. I think another one of the issues here is that, just like with the conversation of privilege, I've always been okay personally with racism being hatred of a person based on their skin color. I think that anything else, any other type of definition, especially one that would
involve a power dynamic,
can work for and against the people, in this case us, when we having this conversation. Because what exactly are we talking about in terms of power? Because when we talk about power and privilege, I want to have these conversations so as long as they're rooted in reality. And by reality, I mean is not just talking about the powers that other people have or the privileges that other people have. Acknowledging if there are any powers or privileges that we would then have. Because then what it ends up becoming is a conversation about what said privileges and things of that nature are. Because I'm definitely not one of those black people that believe that racism is only systemic and that in order to be that, you have to be that power structure. But I understand that there are plenty of black people who view it that way. And so for them, black people cannot be racist. I don't subscribe to that.
Look, and the realest thing about it is, it's not so much that black people can't be racist. Black people cannot by design be institutionally racist, because we do not have a well-established overarching power structure that can affect another ethnic group in the same way that any other institution can. But we can absolutely be prejudiced. We can absolutely be racist in singular situations or in collective situations where it does not involve a power dynamic.
Would you say, though, that that is majority rooted in simply white privilege or white supremacy preventing that from being a thing? Like, how much of that is controllable by us?
I'd say it's a fair 60-40.
I think
I'd say it's 60-40. It ain't quite 50-50 because I don't feel like we're there yet. We can if that person is in position. And that I don't know if you were here for that part where I did say there are moments where we do have what you would call a temporal position, where we are in a temporal position of power where we can affect those certain things.
Because
like in some cases, my job is that, not necessarily, but there are moments where I am an authority figure over people who are typically of a different race than me. I can literally, because we have it in our rules that we can end or cut off a visit or anything for any reason if we deem that the children are unsafe. There are moments where I am literally sitting in a room deciding whether somebody is going to be able to progress further in their case or not. I may not be the only one making the decision, but I am part of it, which means that I have some degree of power over that individual. So yes, in those situations, in situational dynamics, yes, we can be. But if we're talking overarching in general, and the reason we bring that up is because a lot of people go for the general. So in general, yeah, statistically speaking, no, we can't be institutionally racist, but we can absolutely be racist, and we can absolutely be quote unquote, racist in terms of utilizing a power dynamic in individual cases. We absolutely can be. If you're a store manager and you tell and you tell a white person to get the F out, guess what they got to do? They got to leave. You don't have to give a reason.
And that has nothing to do with race.
No.
Which is why I'm saying that, like, this is why I'm a big proponent of controlling the controllables.
Yes.
Because I think
we have those shirts now.
Right. Shameless plug. I think it's a lot. I think when you step out to acknowledge something as being systemically racist.
Yes.
I think you ought to have more than just feelings in such a discussion.
No.
Because where they're like,
All right, you should be good now.
Yeah, we're good. Sorry about that, you guys. All the equipment. But when we talk about power stresses and power dynamics and stuff, it's important to look at all facets of the data, not just the data that confirms your bias, but actually look to disprove what you think to be true. Because some things are a little bit more complicated than maybe what you've been led to believe. But also, I'm a firm believer, like I said before, in control of controllables. So I'm also about, if we're talking about it from a cultural standpoint, Black people not acting like simply nothing is within their control, and that basically, because we don't have people in these positions of power, that they cannot be in these positions of power just because white supremacy exists. I'm pretty sure that's not the dynamic at all in this day and age. We hear every day about some new type of so-called statute against the culture that doesn't allow for people to be doing things. And at the same time, we literally hear about people doing things that we assumed they couldn't do before. So there's a matter of importance or prominence in actually being the changes that we want to see too, when we talk about actually control the controllables, but also supporting people to be able to be put into positions of power. Case in point, you had a Black president. He didn't just get in there off the strength of white America, right? That voter turnout was ridiculous for our culture. People found every which way possible. And folks were trying to make claims about voter suppression even though we know that a decent amount of the population chooses not to vote. So when we talk about controlling the controllables and stuff, there's also a narrative associated with just basically buckling down and accepting a truth that says simply everything is rooted in racism and or everything has some element of not being in so much control just because people aren't there. Sometimes people aren't in an untapped area because ain't nobody took the step. We're in the most freest time in the world for our civilization because we're the present, right? Every other generation before us would have already had much more hardship and actual inequalities that they had to climb through. That's not to say that they don't exist today, but I would never fix my lips to compare whatever current inequalities exist today versus what might have existed 50, 60 years ago. People are going to talk about, oh, well, this is covert and this is overt and all of those kind of things. For me, I need numbers because speculation ain't enough. And you can be wrong about speculation. And there's definitely been points through not just our culture, but history where we have been. So, yeah, it is a numbers game, but that what affects our numbers? What can we do that affects our numbers? That's a thought. That's a rhetorical. You don't even have to answer that. What can we do to affect our representation? Like, what can we do? Because there are 1,000,001 conversations being had about what we can't. There's plenty we can do. We have to change the narrative. We have to be the change we see. You know, it's so easy to adopt an opinion. It's so easy to adopt the opinion that says, like, our case in point, right? Because this is a conversation about perspective. So we can talk about these different things because these are different perspectives, right? Mm-hmm. So it works. Because we ain't gonna keep y'all too late. We're already going later than what we originally intended, but that's okay.
Some of this stuff's gonna be sorry, I had to take a bathroom break. Some of these things will be discussed in other pods. So don't.
Yeah, you know, when we talk about representation,
right?
That's why I hate conversations about representation, because most of the time when I hear points about representation, it almost comes from the area of asking other people to give us the representation opportunity,
right?
If we really want to see representation, why don't we support ourselves and represent ourselves in those avenues? Because that's representation too.
Well, and that goes with the perception and the perspective that we do not have the collective power to do so, we are not unified enough in order to utilize the collective power we have.
Because, bruh, you can be like, okay,
but it can be done on a smaller scale,
though, right? Something simple. You know what? This is a larger scale, but I'm gonna say it right now.
Right.
You can be a black astronaut. Mm-hmm. Why ain't there a lot of black astronauts?
People don't think it's possible.
Look, like I said, I understand, but I wouldn't agree with this perspective. But somewhere this perspective's out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's not enough black astronauts because of systemic racism or some form of racism or discrimination that may exist. That's one possibility. You know what could be another possibility? That we don't raise children up to want to be something like that.
Yes.
You know what's more controllable though? Raising your children up to want to be something like that.
So even if the institutionalized concepts do come up and the institution does press against them, they have an ingrained understanding that excellence is their right.
That's why that's why, like, black excellence, depending on who you're talking to, is either yay or nay. But it's like we always make this point to talk about the first black this, the first black that, right?
Why does it only got to be one?
Right. You think that one, in a world where we've just decided that America is just inherently racist or systemically racist, you really think they would have just let that one get through and there was 1,000,001 applicants? Or what makes more sense? Because in my mind, just based off the way I've come to understand it, what's probably more true is that there aren't that many black applicants. Right. The same way you don't have that many female plumbers. Yeah. It's not because there's some overt force stopping women to be female plumbers. No, what it actually is
just
that they're
don't
not
have
interested in those kind of things, so they don't pick those kind of fields.
Right. And
it's okay. Two things can be true at the same time. It's okay to acknowledge that. But them plumbers show making a lot of money.
Look, that, and you know what another perfect example is the reason why there is a significant lack of males in mental health as therapists, caseworkers, social workers. There is a severe lack of males, especially black males, but just males in general. You know what I'm saying? Is that because there is something systemic that affects and afflicts us as men to make it to where we can't take that job? No. It has a whole lot to do with who applies for it, with who goes forward and does it. You know, like, ironically enough, like, you know, like how people will say, oh, well, there typically is only, like, people will make general statements like, oh, most bosses are male. Most bosses that you're going to have in any job are male, right? I actually have been the opposite. I've only had two. Yeah, in my experience, in my working experience, I've only had 2 male bosses.
You know what?
All the others have been female. And even though the boss is male, my supervisor is female. You know, most of my constituents are female. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes it does depend on what industry you're in. Let's see. But for race, again, it's numbers. Once everything else is said and done, there's still not many of use in comparison, and even then fewer that qualify. But
is that a fault? Even with qualifications, though.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, we're looking at things that are controllable by the individuals too.
Yeah.
So what I'm basically arguing is that, you know,
it can go either way.
But both are true.
Yeah.
Not just one of them.
No, both are true.
And there's enough truth to it that you can make a difference. You can be the change you want to see.
Right.
We don't live in a day and age where you can't be.
No.
Like every day we having a new person. You want more black astronauts, encourage black boys and girls to want to be astronauts.
Right.
There's not a law, there's not a systemic system that inherently disenfranchises against them.
No.
And even if it was, right? Do you not think as a black individual, does anyone not think as a black individual that you ain't never got a position picked over by a white person? You don't think you've ever upseated a white person out of a job?
Oh, easily.
We literally have whole diversity departments
in jobs.
In jobs for that exact purpose.
Yep.
Ketanji Brown Jackson. You know why a lot of people was upset? Because a lot of people felt like just because she was black, she leapfrogged a bunch of other people who worked harder than her and had better credentials for her for the job. And now, on the flip side, people are going to say, well, there's not enough representation. We've been disenfranchised. But we really don't see the logic in how that is literally doing the same thing we're complaining about.
Right.
Deciding that a particular biases makes someone else more worthy of something than you is the same thing. Yeah. That's why I'm just like, when we have these conversations, like, how fair are we to being to where we're not creating a system or a setup when we're not doing the exact same thing, but calling it something different?
And
now it's diversity. Now it's diversity because we black.
Yeah.
And we've been oppressed for so long. White America got to pay for it.
Right.
Think about it like this. If I'm a modern day white person born in America right now, and I come from squalor, let's say you might have one parent, or maybe you had your grandparents. Guess what? I'm white. And I grew up poor. We was on food stamps. I ended up being a fucking in an adoption agency.
I literally have a client. I literally have a client. He's 60 years old, and most questions about his parents and family, he can't answer because he's been in the system for most of his early life, and what it does, it carried on. Well, and this is the other thing, generations do this too. It carried on to his kids. It carried on to where he did not have the necessary things to utilize, necessary skills to teach his kids, to where in a lot of ways his kids are smarter than he is.
And when we talk about numbers and stuff, this
Right.
is also where numbers come into play.
Mhm.
Because what we need to also highlight when we talk about the numbers is the disproportionality and the overrepresentation, right?
Mhm.
When we get to having conversations about roots of problems, then that's where we can talk, because there are more whites
Right.
on welfare than blacks.
Yes.
There's also more of them than us, right?
So
So
then
there's
you
a
have to break down the
Right.
percentages
There's
of
a
both.
disproportionality to it, which means there's an
Yes.
overrepresentation of our population in that.
Yes.
Same thing with crime.
Yes.
Are we solely going to act as if only a systemic setup of racism is to blame? And what would that look like if we've agreed that racism isn't going anywhere and
Right.
cannot simply be done overnight?
Right.
When we control the controllables, how much less do those numbers dwindle down to?
And actually, here's another thing for you to consider. I never say, in most cases, I don't say black on black crime because of the stigma that's carried with it. You know what I say?
What's that?
Racially homogenous crime. Because guess what is most possible? If you look at it statistically and you look at it practically, of course, black on black crime is huge. Of course, it is disproportionately high. You know why? Because guess what else is disproportionately high? White on white crime. Latino on Latino crime, Asian on Asian crime. You know why? Because when you live in, and this is a systemic thing to some degree, especially with black folks, when you live in an environment that is almost completely racially homogenous, and for those that don't know what that word means, this is your word of the day. Homogenous means same or similar. So in an area, if you live in an area or you commonly live in areas that are racially same or similar, you are going to have crime in those areas, and they are going to be represented by numbers of people who are what? Same and or similar. That's why if you look into that's why from the burbs to the boonies, anywhere where there's a bunch of white folk, guess what they do? They do crime on who? Each other. Niggas ain't, look, let's just be real, because I've had to use this argument against somebody because they was getting on my nerves. And this was the old me. I was a little meaner back then. I'm like, niggas ain't just gonna pack they shit up, get up, go to the whole other side of town to kill somebody. 9 times out of 10, the people that piss them off the most, other than the folks at their job, is whoever they living around. Their neighbors.
Right, which is why I said to you before, I'm just like, you know, in this day and age, I'm more worried about the problems I have to deal with my own culture, because not just because of demographics, right? Because in this day and age, it's not as much overt racism. There's not a racial climate
it's covert.
amongst your average everyday white person.
Right.
So I'm not as worried about me personally. And that's why I'm only going to speak for me when I say this, because I am around them enough. I do live in a racially diverse enough place where I will come in contact with them, not just where I work at, but on the street, to where I can say that where I tend to really, you know, look both ways before I cross the street or whatever have you. Is in those capacities where I'm dealing with my own. So I say that to say this. There's the good and the bad that come with it. Yeah. And you got to be willing to acknowledge all of it.
Yeah, because that's the bad. Because that's the only way to solve it.
There's plenty of privilege that does come and opportunities that do come. Because think about it like this for a second. Basically, in this day and age, the wrongs of past white America is what's now being credited or trying to be credited on current black America. I'm going to say that again. The wrongs of past white America are now trying to be credited to current black America. So what's happening is, if you're a white person in this day and age, you already come into this world with most of society viewing you a particular type of way.
Yep.
Regardless of any actions that you have done. White guilt is a real thing.
Yep.
And I'm saying, like, for me, I could just simply take my shoes off and put the other shoes on the other feet.
Right. And
I would hate to feel like
you're the enemy the moment you walk in the room.
Right. And if this is communally understood that both parties suffer from this, then why is it such a pecking order about who we deciding what is wrong and when it is wrong?
Right.
I say that to say that racism has this interesting way of working in both directions.
Yeah.
But most of the time when we have these conversations,
most things in life do.
We tend to only speak about it as if it's only happening or affecting one group.
And it's because, and you know what most of it is? A lot of it is because when we don't skew it one way, there's always somebody that skews it the other way.
Like, could you imagine?
Now,
like,
I will say this.
Why don't people feel, hold on, let me just say this.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't people feel, right, bro?
Mm-hmm.
That lady, I remember it was in the news. A lady got upset because she said that basically she felt like she didn't want critical race theory being taught in school.
Okay.
Because her point was simply this. One, if your parents don't teach you about, and I can't speak for everybody. I know in Chicago curriculum, I learned about slavery and racism.
Right.
But I also learned about it at home. So I had both of those. Now, if you didn't learn about any form of racism at all in school, I don't know what type of school you was going to.
Right.
That's not for me. That's not me saying that it was all encompassing. I don't think it could ever be all encompassing.
No.
What I'm saying is though,
there's something
you got the bullet points up that you. It wasn't like they completely didn't include it in history books.
No.
Let's not act like that. Let's be real here.
It was in there.
So in a day and age where part of critical race theory's ethos is to basically teach white guilt.
Right.
Why would somebody's Gen Z, why would somebody want their Gen Z child that's even that much more removed from something like modern day or olden day racism and slavery be taught that essentially they are supposed to not only just acknowledge that it existed, but that they have some sort of debt owed to Black America and Black people as a whole because
by virtue of existing.
Yeah, that's
now here and
how
here's
do you not see
and here's the
way racism
racism
and bigotry and biasness in that?
And here's
the same thing.
Here's the big thing about this. I got 2 points. One that goes along with that, and another one that I was thinking about when I was in the game. One thing about it is, this is another case of things being true but not true at the same time. White people are by virtue benefactors of contemporary and olden day and current white supremacy and racism. That is the truth. However, that does not mean that they owe some sort of that does not mean that every single white person in America owes some sort of existential debt to Black society.
It's basically
and that is the truth. Because here's the thing. Yes, you do benefit from that. You do benefit to some degree from something. But the simple fact, yes, exposing them to the info to increase sympathy is cool. Okay, cool. If you want to, if you really want to educate them, cool. But the thing is, you have to think about it this way. You have to think about how we were already done. When you get beat over the head and get told that you're not doing anything because you're not good enough, and you are put in situations, because some of us were put in situations. Some of us were lucky, some of us weren't. Some of us are put in situations in racially homogenous neighborhoods that do not get proper funding, that do not get the type of books, that do not get the type of opportunities in order to be able to properly matriculate through not only society, but through school, and to be able to make and apply that stuff until we move out of that area. Do you not realize that in some sick way you're doing that to them?
Right,
just
like
not in the same way.
It literally becomes the same thing, and the justification
you're turning it.
The justification ends up being
we went through it.
Well, and it don't even be as much as we as it be our ancestors, and it's just like, hold on, y'all. Like, do you not see? You can teach empathy without
a stick.
Excuse me.
You can teach empathy without palming a blade or a rod.
Because for the average white person in America, do they really have a lack of empathy? When we really look at the numbers of the majority of whites that support
what they
things having to do with our culture in general,
what they
like
typically, and here's the truth. Here's another truth. What they typically have is not a lack of empathy. What they have is a lack of understanding. In that they literally don't know how to approach us in most cases, and as a result, they scared. They scared to say anything. They scared to wink in your direction. They're scared to say certain stuff. Because I have literally been around white folk. Have you ever been around white folk where they want to say something and you look at them and you like,
it's like, it's
bro,
okay,
just
bro.
say it.
Yeah,
look,
like
we will tell you if it's wrong.
Yes,
I'm not gonna beat you over the head if you just happen to say something.
It's
stupid.
no different. It's not that much different than regular textbook cancel culture.
Yes,
that's the funny thing of it.
It is,
and it's like if you're gonna have that energy for feminism or the LGBTQ community or any of these other hot button topics, the logic needs to remain the same. Otherwise, what it shows is not only that you have a bias, but maybe
preferential treatment.
To the words right out my mouth.
Yeah, lack of action to help undo what's been done. Yes. Now I will say that is true. What I was gonna get at that I just thought about that you were talking about before. Here's one thing that we can do. If there's anything that we learn, you know what? A lot of us should have learned this because we came from this era. Remember what the South did, like with Dirty South hip hop and stuff? You remember what they did that was remarkably different from every other coast of America whenever they blew up? There was never just one guy. In fact, there wasn't 5 guys. It was a new one every week.
Yeah.
It was a takeover. Everybody came out. All of a sudden, everybody was doing snap music and doing all this stuff, learning the lingo, doing all the stuff.
Look, it didn't matter how you look. And you know why this matter, right? How many of y'all think Paul Wall is one of the coldest, like low-key one of the coldest lyricists out there?
He's cold.
Do he look black? Is he black?
No.
In the general sense? Hell no. But that never mattered.
No.
That never mattered.
Because he represented something that much greater.
Because we are more than just our racial identity. We still have our individualism, which consists of our different thoughts and different opinions. Now, and to brush one broad stroke over the black ethos to just say we are a monolith in which we only think one way
is automatically you're not only discrediting, but you're being disrespectful.
It's problematic, and not only does it not speak to the multiplicity of who we are. The same thing can be said about white America, about the Asian community, and so on and so forth.
Because you know what's funny about that? If there is something that I have witnessed numerous times, is white people coming at white people for white people. And they will do it harder than we do. And I swear, and here's the thing. Here's something that you have to consider. Racism and classism are in the same bed together. The only when we see shifts and when we see certain occurrences happen on either end, it just depends on who's on top. You know what I'm saying? That's the biggest thing. And yes, people see color first. We're not there and yet likely won't ever. Look, that is very true. But in general, that is very true. But get what I said. Racism and classism are in bed with each other. And part of the reason that black folk get kicked down so badly is because no matter who's on top, we experience the detriment of both. But see, a lot of us experience the detriment of both.
That's why I hate when people make claims sometimes of racism.
Right.
And I'm quick
because
to
sometimes
it's
investigate just classism.
I'm quick to look into it to really find where the racism is. Because you wonder why we live in a culture where people lack empathy. It's like the boy who cried wolf. If everything is racism, then nothing is racism.
Right.
I'm gonna say that again because that's a fucking bar if anything else ain't.
If everything is racism.
If everything is racism, then nothing is racism.
And if everything is canceled, then nothing is canceled.
Like, so we have to be mindful. when we have to set real parameters for what
Right.
is racism, so we're not so quick to call everything is racism when
Yeah.
everything is not. And then
Some
maybe
stuff is just a lack of understanding.
some things it's just people just not doing what the fuck they supposed to do.
I mean, look. Here's my thing. There is no reason that you should expect some homebred white dude from a farm in Iowa to know what the fuck a kente cloth is. Okay, that is stupid. All right. The same way that you can walk up to some niggas in the hood in the deepest part of Chicago and ask them what cornhole is. Okay? Some shit you ain't gonna understand. Period. Dot. Does that mean that they're racist? No.
But see,
does that mean the other group is racist? No. But that just means that they have what? A lack of understanding and education. But let me get onto this point, and then
go ahead.
we probably need a dip. But
we running,
one thing I will say, here's one thing that white folk do that we do not do often, and this is something very big. When they bring one person, when they get in, and they get a foot in the door in a place, they bring one person in, then that person brings somebody in, then that person brings somebody in, then that person brings somebody in, and all of a sudden the whole area is homogenous and all of them are cool with each other. When we get in somewhere, we so hype about it that we scared to tell anybody even where we work. We so gassed up about it, we scared to tell anybody that there's positions open. Oh yeah, well, yeah, hey, look. Oh, well, I ain't telling Tyrone there's a position open because I don't want to deal with that nigga. No. You're missing it. Even with other races, not even just white folk, when one gets in, they bring everybody else in. You know what I'm saying? I literally saw an example of this where a lady got on at a job and because she knows her husband used to work for the union and he needs some side work right now, she talked to her boss and was like, hey, do you need a maintenance man? He can't work the kitchen. He ain't no good at being a server, but he can put stuff together. Do you need a maintenance man? He can work the same hours as me because we share a vehicle. And they like, all right, cool. That stuff like that is how you offset it. It doesn't mean it's ever going to be equal. No. Does it mean it's ever going to be even? No. Does it mean that suddenly those people who say that racism doesn't exist and that black people are full of it and they're just complaining and are just gaslighting white people by saying that racism exists and acknowledging instances where institutionalized and overt and covert racism exists? No. Does it mean that suddenly those people are not full of shit? Absolutely not. Because I have called out numerous of them and I will again. But it does mean that we can start to even the playing field because that's where we start.
We have listen.
You got to even the playing field first.
I always say it matters. To me, it's going to always matter and I'm always going to have greater respect. I look at the severity of situations and stuff. Mm-hmm. My grandmother was born in 1917, rest her soul.
Woo.
This shit here, this 2022 shit people complaining about,
they ain't even have time to argue about this.
This ain't 1917 shit at all. And we need to acknowledge that difference.
It ain't even 1938.
There's way more privilege, opportunity, and all of those type of things. Right. And back then, the wealth that the Black America had before the stock market crashed and the depression and everything kicked off, they were doing a lot better.
Yeah.
But also,
it was collective.
This is why I don't like identity politics. Because when we rope-a-dope everybody to be a certain type of way under one particular color, whatever, this is where a lot of the stereotypes come from. People say they don't like stereotypes. If you don't like stereotypes, then you shouldn't like identity politics because it prevents us from recognizing individuals and individual problems versus blaming a group for a societal problem.
Right.
It's just like the difference between being black and a criminal and just simply being a criminal. Typically, the word thug is associated with that, right? That's a stereotype.
Yes.
We don't like the stereotype because immediately what we think of is black and criminal.
Yeah.
Associated with that word, right?
It's a stigma.
Right. And so it's just like that only happens when you decide that the people represent the thing.
Yeah.
And you don't take into consideration the individual.
Now, with that being said, I will ask this one question. Lord, I know we need to leave, but this is a narrative that was brought up, and since we're talking about perspectives, do you think that in some ways, whenever they started saying thug in a more prevalent sense, they were replacing the N-word in so many ways and so many other words that were questionable about Black people with the word thug as a way to identify?
Have I ever thought that?
Yeah.
Yes. Do I think that today? No.
Okay.
Because to me,
I've had moments. I'm not gonna lie.
I know I've definitely thought it. That's why I said that. But to me, there ain't no replacement. And you know, we had a conversation amongst the guys about this before.
Yeah.
Some of my other buddies, about the difference between the ER N-word, that word, and nigga.
Yeah.
Because some of us don't differentiate, and some of us do.
Yep.
And the thing is that, you know, some of us have a problem when anybody say either word. Some of us don't. It's murky waters. But you know what?
Absolutely.
You know, for the most part, we can control the narrative of that.
Most things that matter are.
We don't live in a society that is hell bent on that being part of the regular vernacular.
Right.
Like there's enough what was the word Keontae used earlier? Empathy.
Yeah.
That's not a part of the lexicon of what people say all the time.
Right.
Especially non-Black people.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's an influx of white folks saying either of those words.
Right. You will get some.
Because times are different.
Right.
In that sense. That doesn't mean they don't say it,
no.
But it's not a prevailing part of the language like it would have been
60,
70 years ago.
Look, and again, the biggest thing about that is we have gone from overt to covert. And now I don't know if you agree with this, but this is just where I come from. There is a lot of what I would call covert racism that occurs. There's a lot of covert racism and overt classism that occurs in America. Now, I will say this. A lot of people in America are more classist than they are racist. That is true. We are most certainly more classist than we are racist. The reason being is because rich white folk will treat poor white folk like they're the scum of the earth, the same as us. Now, here's the thing. And they can be in their own family. I've seen it happen. I've literally seen white supremacy work against white people because white supremacy doesn't just affect racism. White supremacy affects classism, because you got to remember the white supremacist power structure is also rooted in class and race. So if you ain't got enough money to pay the bills, they don't like you either. And I have literally seen that. Let's see. I fear that too many of us have been tainted from those. Their kids' growth will be stunted and even worse, cause further destruction to us as a whole.
You know what? For me, Keontae, I feel like it's one of those things that we should take for reference, but we shouldn't identify with. So to also go with what you just asked me, basically, I used to, you know what? I use the Illuminati as the perfect example for this.
Who, Lord?
The whole idea or concept of what is typically referred to as the Illuminati, I kind of view like covert racism like that.
Yeah.
In that, depending on your perspective, right? You may have a lot more so speculative thought about what you think something is or how it is. In that, there is some things that are covert racism are really just different perspectives of how people think certain things are or what's going on.
Right.
And this is why some of this shit is, look, let's keep it a buck. Some of this stuff does have merit and may have some proof of concept.
Yeah.
Some of it, though, leans very heavily into spiritual and hotep scientific bullshit.
Mm.
And I'm not afraid to say that.
And the funny thing is, them niggas is classes too.
And the thing is
exceedingly
is that,
so.
The thing is that
they prejudice too.
If it's not something that I can control, the only thing I can really do at that point is obsess and worry about that thing. But what I can also do is exactly what you just said. Work with what I have.
Yep.
Or control the controllables. So I keep those things in mind.
I hope you know I beat that phrase to death.
Because covert, the problem with covert things is just that, like, sometimes
it's exactly that.
They make a lot of sense to where it's things that, you know what, yeah, I can see that. But a lot of times it really just sounds like a lot of echo chamber, confirmation bias, and speculatory bullshit.
Now, sometimes look,
get that shit away from me.
And sometimes what it is, because I deal with this sometimes with clients, is I tell them not to make assumptions about things, because here's the thing. What you do before you make an assumption is you read the room. You read the room. Because yes, if you go in expecting something negative to happen, more than likely it's going to. Now, in some cases, they are exactly right that something negative is going to happen. And sometimes you get that confirmation bias as a result of your experience, of learned experience. You know what I'm saying? If you've had experiences that this particular person is going to treat you like shit in this particular way, and it happens numerous times, and maybe it doesn't happen a couple times, guess what you're going to think 9 times out of 10? That you are going to get treated that particular way.
Yes. Oh, man. Yeah. Listen, you know what? I remember I was watching it in a video of the Daily Wrap-Up crew. Shout out to those brothers. It was having a conversation with like a TikTok star about like a bunch of different dynamics as far as relations and thoughts on men and women in relationships, particularly in the Black community.
Right.
And one of the things that stuck out to me was just the premise of how some people adopt opinions and beliefs of people off the internet that they haven't themselves experienced, but have decided that, oh, since enough people talk about this, this is true. But not only this is true, I have the rage and the empathy or the sympathy of somebody who has experienced it, even though I haven't. But also because of that, instead of being the change that I want to see in talking about when you don't deal with those dynamics or how to avoid those dynamics, I want to portray myself as if I'm one of the affected. I'm one of the people that think like this, and I will spout their truths, even though it is not my truth at all.
Comparative victimhood.
Right?
It's rooted in that.
And so it's just like, yo,
you should feel comfortable to tell your own story.
And it's okay. Two things can be true at the same time. What somebody else experienced, you might not experience. That doesn't mean that neither one of those things didn't happen. But with that, we do have to look at the rationale within things. This ain't just a feeling-based world.
No.
It ain't. And
people like to think it is.
Like, what's the expression? Facts don't care about your feelings.
Sure don't.
Because your feelings are rooted in what? Your perspective.
Yes.
And you know what? Honestly, bro, I think that's a good note to end it on, because we about to go into 2.5 hours with y'all.
It got good. It got good.
It got very good.
And you know, and look, and coming from a person,
we even gave y'all some of our
other subjects.
We gave y'all some spoils.
Y'all got some
perspectives of other potential.
Y'all living good out here. But look, and this is me, because I've dealt with this. I dealt with this from 3 positions of stigma. I've dealt with certain levels of stigma as a Black man in America. I've dealt with certain levels of stigma as a preacher's kid. I've dealt with certain levels of stigma as a Black man in America who was raised in an upper middle class household and environment. So I didn't got all the shit.
Bruh.
So with that being
talk about stigmas.
With that being said,
since we throwing flags out there,
being said,
hold on, since we throwing flags out there, goddammit, I done had to deal with fucking the life of being Black in a fucking big city.
Yep.
One of the biggest cities in the fucking United States.
Yep.
One of the most talked about, for better or for worse, places in the United States.
Yes, sir.
While being a Black man.
Yes, sir.
While growing up in the fucking projects.
Yes, sir.
Like.
And being a big nigga on top of it.
Listen, man.
Yeah, you in the shit, bro.
When we talk about identity, listen. I'm black.
Mm-hmm.
I like anime.
Mm-hmm.
I like poetry.
Preach it.
I like black women.
Yes, sir.
Preferably
black women. And that ain't knocking those who like any other women, but this just what we like.
I like the truth.
Yes.
These days I'm mostly left leaning, but I am not a Republican.
Nope.
I've been a Democrat or to the right.
I personally don't like either one of y'all. But
right, like I'm one half a black in a minute.
Yes, sir.
You know, we here.
Right.
We here. And that's the thing about individuality. It allows you to escape the stereotypes in the ethos of.
Yeah.
But you can be both things at the same time. You can be black and be a Democrat.
Yes.
You can be black and be Republican. You can be black and be trans. You can be black and be a woman.
You can be black and be a nerd.
Come on. You can be all those things and be white too. Except black. Well, you can be mixed.
Yeah, you can be
so
mixed.
I guess that's that.
Look,
right?
But you know what the biggest thing is? The biggest thing is, and this should be pissing me off. I ain't gonna cap. It'd be funny as hell how different black folk act around you whenever you are in a position of power.
Or whenever you don't just choose to only identify with what is considered black.
Yes.
When you're the outcast, when you're the weirdo.
Dog, I've had...
Oh, you do? How many times, and that could be an episode in itself. Y'all, we are on a tangent, but hear us out one quick. Here's something I want y'all to think about. Right. How many times your blackness was questioned or you questioned somebody's blackness because they did something that didn't fit,
that was contrary to the narrative
of blackness.
Blackness. Contemporary blackness. Yeah, I've been there.
So let's think about some of the times when
I've been told I talk white.
Ourselves.
Look, I've been told I talk white.
Same.
I've been told that niggas don't like anime. I've been told that what is it? I'm not aggressive enough. I'm not mean enough. I was literally told by a black woman that I should probably pursue a white girl because of my personality. I've been told that I would get ran over by a black woman. I have been told that what's another one? Ageism too, because I actually got into kindergarten and primary school early, so I had ageism against me as well. I've been told that because I'm a preacher's kid, I'm holier than thou. I've been told that because I live in a better neighborhood, that I don't understand shit about the hood, and that I can't say nothing about the hood, and that I can't make critiques about niggas in the hood, or that I must want that life. I have. As a result of being a caseworker, it's been assumed that I am DCS, that I am the enemy, that I'm here to take your kids, that I don't give a shit about your life, or because I haven't been in it that long, I'm inexperienced, I'm this, I'm that. Look,
this man swatted a gnat while running down his
I did swat a gnat while running it down. Hey, here's a better one. I'm 28 and not a parent. So obviously I don't know shit about kids, or about helping to raise kids, or about helping to deal with kids. And I've been told this by niggas who don't have their kids. Woo! Fun shit. But and look, and that's the funniest thing. The funniest thing about that is that stigmas exist so long as you look for them long enough. And I know white people that have many more than I do. Shoot. I know, I have had to sit in front of people who live in opulent...
think about yours. Think about your list. We all got one. We all got one, right? Think about your own personal list.
Right.
I know you can relate to some of those things as I can that he just mentioned.
Right. Look. And, I was also being a preacher's kid. Everybody that are members of the Hotep community, or everybody that's members of the atheist, agnostic, or whatever in music, I have literally been the screaming board for them, being like, why you in church? Why do you care? Like, or asking me all these existential ass questions. Look, or asking me all these existential questions about religion, Christianity, the problems with it, all that crap that I really don't want to talk about all the time.
Man,
if I want to talk about it, we can talk about it. That's cool. I don't have a problem. But do not come to me with your angry ass narratives just because I belong to a specific group that you have a problem with.
See, the biggest benefit of us acknowledging the individuality within people is that, right?
You don't pigeonhole them.
Not only do you not pigeonhole them, but we can actually be more selective about the
Mhm.
specific people that we actually need to be taken care of.
Mhm.
See, this is another reason why the extremists get to live in harmony and
Yep.
scream their message, because we're so worried about chastising the group when we can't functionally do that.
Mhm.
We can't functionally punish the entire group.
Meanwhile, the
But the
extremists are
entire
living
group,
good.
the entire group takes the blame,
Right.
while the extremists are the actual functioning ones causing
Right.
the issues.
Look.
That is why any of these dynamics will never end, because the extremists are never actually targeted.
No.
And so
And
what
they're
ends up
the
happening
main
is,
ones pushing the narrative.
and so everyone else gets
Mhm.
the blame.
Yep.
It don't matter what you talk about. We could talk about gun control.
Yep.
That's why you got so many people up in arms, because like, man, there's plenty of us good citizens with guns. Why are we being chastised instead of just going after
Shoot.
the extremists
Look,
and putting them in their place?
Look,
That Greenwood dude,
yeah.
law-abiding guy. People tried to add little superlative bullshit facts around it
I
to
don't
try
like that.
and take away from the fact that he saved a bunch of fucking people's lives.
Can we also talk about the fact that they
And
called
the police wasn't gonna get there in time
right?
to do
They
that.
had 15 seconds. Look, and you know what? I like that somebody said this in a comment. I know. I promise we're gonna leave. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
but look. I like that somebody said this in a comment. They
We
said two
up.
things. One person said, "Why the hell did they call him a good Samaritan when that is not what that's defined as?" Yeah, he was a cool dude who shot somebody. Okay, that's great, but do not say he's a good Samaritan. He was protecting himself just as well as anybody else. That does not. That's definitively not what that is. Two, I'm glad that somebody said this in a comment. They said, instead of celebrating this dude and being so happy that he murdered somebody, why don't we get him some therapy? Because I'm sure he probably feels some type of way about the fact that he had to murder somebody in cold blood and only had 15 seconds to decide to do it.
I mean,
Especially if he ain't never killed nobody.
Sure.
That's a little damaging. That's some stuff that's going to cause some problems. And and even if that person is viewed as an incorrigible piece of filth that is murderous and evil, in some part of his mind, there may be a part of him that says, maybe there was another way.
And yeah,
and now he will never know.
We will never know. But you know what? This is what I do know. And this is once again my last perspective, and then we're gonna get out of here, at least on my end.
Yeah, we gotta go.
It's simply, I'm glad he did it.
You're right.
I'll say I'm glad he did.
Yeah, I'm glad he did it.
What? And it's as simple as this. There's a good chance that individual would have killed a lot more people,
including him.
And you know what?
And he wouldn't even be here to think about it.
And you know what? The guy needed to stop. Once people start committing crimes,
some stuff just
they gotta be taken care of.
Right. Especially things like that where you're literally killing in a public place.
When you harming other people, it's only so much grace, at least for me, perspective-wise, that I can give you when you start harming other people.
Because you're utilizing your perspective you're weaponizing your perspective in order to destroy innocent lives.
What'd you say? That's with nature.
Yep, that's a sin against nature. That is a sin against nature.
It's just like it's the worst.
And again, this is one of the. But I do appreciate, and maybe it is that I'm 2 shakes, a lamb's tail, and a degree away from being a therapist. Yes, Lord. But it's the fact that people do not think about that. Y'all are so quick to hype somebody up for something that they have to question existentially for the rest of their lives. Get that man some therapy. Get that man some therapy. Please don't stick him on Dr. Phil. Please don't stick him on Oprah or whatever. Please don't put him on a talk show and be like, well, how was it in that daring moment? How did you feel? You really think he wants to talk? Get him a therapist. Okay? Stop minimizing people's existential suffering just because they did something you like. Now, am I happy that he did it? Yes. But do I personally think that he needs some help? Yes. Look, if you've ever talked to soldiers, former soldiers or anything like that, former military, they will all tell you one thing that they wish they had is somebody who understood and who either didn't celebrate them as the greatest thing since cooked food or called or labeled them a baby killer. Okay? And just like with perspective, say that bullet would have ricocheted and hit the wrong person, we'd be crucifying that dude right now. All it takes is a slight difference of perspective to go from being praised to being a pariah. And I will end with that. Be careful and be mindful of what your perspective leads you to do, leads you to say, and how it leads you to approach things.
Agreed.
Because you just might be somewhat mistaken. But with that being said, this has been the Black in a Minute podcast, sponsored by the illustrious Twyman Art.
Yes, yes.
We do appreciate y'all sticking around with us because I know this is a long stream, and I know some of y'all got kids and you probably want to go to sleep.
We might not do a part 2 with it being this long.
It'll come later. Anyway, the point being is we do still appreciate you guys sticking around, waylaying your opinions and everything. And just know, no opinion is foreign to us. Even if we don't fully agree to it, we will try to understand it. And we will not judge you for it. We will not flag you for it unless it's one of those Nazi bots. Those have to go. But if you're a real person and you have a real opinion, we will consider it and we will talk about it. With that being said, I am NeRo AnGeLo.
And I go by the DarksKing poet. That's DarksKing with a G on the end.
And we once again want to say thank you. We appreciate you. We love you. And we hope that you have a good evening. Peace out.
Power.